Well, good morning to you. I'm out here in the backyard on Friday morning, and it was actually the sun was shining out here a minute ago, and I thought I'd be sitting out here talking to you in the sun, and now the clouds have come over and it's a little bit breezy. But this is going to be part two of the deconstructed Bible study that I began with you yesterday. But just before I get to that, there's just a couple of comments I want to make. There's a lot going on right now. Of course, for us here in New Zealand, and most of you watching this on the Hope Community Notice Board, you're here in New Zealand. Some of you will be seeing it on the Hope Tauranga page, and I know that you guys are sort of spread around all over the place. Here in New Zealand, we're in a lockdown, so of course that's pretty big news for us. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world right now. Like I was watching coverage on Fox News today of, what's been unfolding in Afghanistan, and also the effect that that's having on the United States. And there's international reaction to all of this too, and we're sort of living in a time where there's possibly quite a dramatic shift in the international power structure happening. It's easy to get caught up in all that. But I got this message from a young lady this morning. I think she's 15. She just sent me this. She said, "Hi, Kristen, I was reading the Bible last night." That's a pretty good thing to do when you're 15, by the way. "And I saw a scripture in the Bible that I thought relates to everything happening in Afghanistan. And Mum told me to tell you, Psalm 72, verse 14. They will be rescued from tyranny and torture, for their lifeblood is precious in his eye." We were praying for Afghanistan last night in our weird Zoom prayer meeting. And that's a pretty good Bible verse. We can agree and say, Lord, do that. Rescue them from tyranny and torture. So back to the lockdown part of all this. There are different ways that people deal with the lockdown. And it's like the old saying, it's different strokes for different folks. It's not one size fits all. Different people will do this in very different ways. But I just wanted to share with you a couple of things that work really well for me. I do well if I have some sort of degree of routine. And so what I do here is I resist the temptation to stay in bed in the morning. I still get up nice and early, and I sit in the front room of our house, which is just through the door and over there. And I have my early time of prayer and put my headphones on and have a time of worship. It's quite quiet, of course, because there's lots of people. Well, everyone else is asleep. Then after that, I go and do some exercise. So I was going to go for a run this morning, but I didn't want to. So I jumped on the exercycle that we have in the garage. And then I get into doing a bit of Bible study, like I've just been doing this morning around what I'm sharing with you. I might look at a few things related, church related stuff or whatever, just getting ready for the weekend or whatever. And then after I've done that, it's generally time for morning tea. I've got to be a bit careful about that because, when you're at home, the pantry is handy and the fridge is handy. And I think I told you a while ago that I saw a post from the lockdown last time that someone posted on their Facebook or something. They said that they hadn't been socially distancing from their fridge, and I need to make sure I do that. Then after I've had morning tea, I like to do some sort of a project, hence why I was quite keen to get the polish and be able to polish my boat. I gave my car a good wash yesterday, which is, you can sort of think, oh, that's a bit pointless because, this time of year, all the yellow pollen will just land back on it. But it's not pointless. It's not just about washing the car. For me, it's about having a project. So today I've got a project just around the back of the house, going to do a little bit of gardening. And then by the time I've done that, see, it's quite good to do some work. Good to do something like that. And then after that, we'll have lunch. And then generally after that, Tasha and I will go for a walk. We'll go out around the reserve out here. And, that's a bit weird during lockdown because, some people, you're walking along the path and they're so desperate to social distance that it's almost like they dive into the flax bushes as you walk past them. Some people, we are very intentional about greeting people. Hello, how are you? Good morning. And some of them look at you horrified, like they're concerned that they're going to catch the virus verbally. But we'll go out for a walk. We'll get out of the house. We're sticking to, the restrictions in terms of staying in our neighbourhood. And then quite often after that, I'll just get on the phone and talk to a few people, like check in on a few people. I call my mum every day. And then I just, if someone's on my heart, I give them a call. Because, I think one of the worst bits of advice that we were given was don't talk to your neighbour. That's terrible advice. Do talk to your neighbour. You have to honour the rules and restrictions around social distancing and everything. But you can talk to your neighbour. Do it on the phone. Do it on FaceTime. Do it on iMessage. Whatever. Because isolation is fertile ground for disorientation. And the other thing that I just want to suggest is this. Don't squander this time by watching endless Netflix. We want to be like the wise, not the foolish, who went out and bought oil so that they were ready for the master to return. So I'd encourage you, seize the opportunity to find a good balance between resting and preparing. This is not a time to retire. This is a time to refire. That sounds pretty tricky, doesn't it? But, grab it. Grab the opportunity. So, very briefly, let's go back to our deconstructed Bible study of Acts 16 through 31. If you didn't see the first part, I guess it's still here on the Facebook page. So, Acts 16 through 31. Here's a quick review. Paul and Silas are put in prison, right? It begins, they arrive in Philippi. They're being followed around by a slave girl, an enslaved girl who has a demon that causes her to shout truth. These men are telling you the way of salvation. Paul discerns the demonic component to what is happening, and he casts the demon out. He demonstrates authority to cast the demons out of this girl and to set her free. And then, as a result of that, the crowd is turned against them, and a deeply unjust beating with rods takes place, and then they are imprisoned in the innermost part of the prison. And here's what we talked about yesterday. What happened next? Verse 25, at midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. So in that dark, smelly, oppressive place of torment that would have been familiar with the sound of lamenting and groaning, of shouting, complaining, even obscenity, worship echoed through the halls and through the prison cells, and the prisoners heard it. There were no lights, there was no smoke machine, there was no AV equipment, no big band, just darkness, oppression, probably a stench, and worship. So that's where we're up to. And then this happens next. Verse 26. Suddenly, there was a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everybody's chains were loosed. So in response to this midnight worship, there was an earthquake, the foundations of captivity were shaken, all the doors were open, and all the chains were loosed. So here is my question for you and for me. How big is our vision for worship, for the effect that worship has on the spiritual environment around us, especially worship that happens in whatever might be like a midnight time for us, worship that costs us something? See, I think this, we've become very accustomed to worship that sounds beautiful and professional and is in a comfy auditorium with lights and smoke machines and audio visual equipment. And I'm not even here really to blow the raspberry at that. A lot of creativity goes into that sort of thing. And I like you, I often enjoy that greatly. But what about this? What about worship that happens when it's just you, when you don't have access to that? Even worship that might happen in a lockdown. You see, I believe the enemy's plans are never more under threat than when we choose to worship in the times when God seems distant or when he seems absent, when worship is the last thing that we feel like we want to do. When we wonder whether God's goodness is still in effect, when maybe we even feel isolated, alone, maybe discouraged or depressed, and in that place, we choose to look heavenwards, to lift our voice, and to worship Him regardless of how we feel. I don't know today what kind of a day you find yourself having. Maybe you love being locked down. Maybe for you it's incredibly difficult. Maybe today you feel light and free and fiery in your heart, or maybe you feel heavy and oppressed and a little bit lukewarm or cold. My encouragement to myself and to you today is let's lean into this ancient testimony of Paul and Silas in the prison and let's worship. Because who knows, as you worship alone, as you worship in your household, as you worship, even if you are having a really rough time of what's going on in the world right now, or right here in New Zealand with the lockdown, as you worship, who knows, maybe an earthquake might just be released through the spiritual atmosphere around you. Maybe the foundations of the enemy's attempts to imprison you will be shaken just like they were back there in that stinky prison in Philippi. Maybe the doors that the enemy is trying to close you in with will swing open and chains will fall off. You see, this ancient testimony has application for us today, and this can be a picture of you and I right here, right now, today. But I also believe it's a picture of the last days church in the tumultuous days that are ahead of us. As the church increasingly faces persecution, as the church increasingly deals with the adversary's attempts to impress and imprison believers, there will be a people who will stand in the darkness of the events unfolding in the end times, and we will worship. It's Philippians 2:14 and 15. Do all things without complaining, disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as stars in the world, or in the night sky, like lights in the night sky. Let's do that today. I encourage you, let's worship today. Let's turn our eyes on Jesus today. And let's look at everything through the prism of who He is and what He is doing. God bless you. God bless your household. And I'll be back with another part tomorrow.